Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. Welcome everyone to our very special Refugee Week event. I'm just going to make sure that my video and Lorna's video are pinned for everyone to see. So those behind doing the tech, is that done for us? I'm not sure. We'll carry on. Okay, welcome everyone to our very special Refugee Week event. I'm Vicky from the National Literacy Trust, and I'll be your host this morning. With me on screen today, I have Lorna, our BSL interpreter for the event. We're here together to mark Refugee Week and to spend some time with the wonderful Michael Rosen, exploring his poetry collection, On the Move, Poems About Migration. Michael will read you some of his poems and offer you some writing inspiration. And at the end of the session, there'll be a chance for you to ask Michael some questions. So teachers, for this, you can use the chat box function, add your students' questions, include the name of your school for a shout out, and we'll be able to ask Michael those questions. Please note you won't be able to see all the different questions coming in, but rest assured we will see your questions. The theme for Refugee Week is our home. And in our event today and through our follow-up resources, we want you to think about what home means to you and how you create a sense of home and welcome in your communities. Home can be many things. It can be a physical place, a feeling, a person. Home can be found in smells, tastes, objects, memories. It can be in the clothes we wear, the languages we speak, the food we eat. Home can be the communities that we are a part of. Home can be more than one place, and finding it can be a journey, as it is for so many people who are forced to leave countries and have to rebuild their lives. Refugee Week UK are inviting us all to think about making our shared home, that's the world we all live in, a more welcoming, safe and sustainable place for everybody. And one way we can do this is through our words, the words we say and the words we write. And today I hope that Michael Rosen's poetry will show you just how powerful words can be. So let's introduce him. As I'm sure you are all aware, Michael Rosen is a children's author, poet, presenter and political activist from England. And he is one of the most beloved children's authors in the UK. So welcome, Michael.
Hello. Yes, thank you very much, Vicky. Thank you, Lorna. It's lovely to be here. Hello to you all. And today we're talking about, as we've heard, my collection. Oh, you won't be able to see it. It's called On the Move, Poems of Migration. And I put this book together because it was a way of thinking about us as human beings on this planet. So if you think, here's the planet, we're human beings all over this planet. And if we were a Martian from outside, we would see that people are moving. Everybody is moving. Some people are moving next door. Some people are moving, if you like, to work and going to different places. Some people are moving from country to country. Some people are getting in boats. Some people are getting in trains. Everybody is moving. It's what we are. The human race is a moving race. So we are one race, the human race, and we are a moving race. So that's why I wrote that. And we never know why we have to move. That was something that the late, great poet Benjamin Zephaniah once made very clear to me. He said, we never know, said Benjamin Zephaniah, why we might have to move. He once said to me, I had to take in refugees once. I said, where from, Benjamin? And he said, the Lake District. That's an area in England, if you don't know it, and that's because there were floods. And so Benjamin took in some people from the Lake District. So we never know why or how we might become refugees. It might be war, it might be famine, it might be for any reason at all. It might be because we are starving for some reason. And so, in a way, that lies behind this book, particularly because in my family, there were refugees, and we might hear a bit about that as we go along. So we know the theme for today, for Refugee Week UK this year, is home. So when I think about home, I think about my parents, and I think about my mum. And my parents could speak another language because their parents and grandparents had been what are sometimes called economic migrants, but they were in a way refugees because they had been persecuted in the places they came from. That is to say, people were horrible to people like them. So I'm Jewish in background. We're called Jews, Jewish in background. And they were persecuted, that my ancestors were persecuted back in Poland and areas like that. So they came to this country speaking another language, and the language they spoke was Yiddish. And Yiddish is a language that they spoke, and my parents spoke a bit of it. And so I thought I'd write a bit about that. Sometimes when I was at home, I didn't know whether my mum and dad were speaking English or Yiddish. So I remember my mum used to talk about the cloth that we dried the dishes up, and she used to call that a schmutter. And I remember going to school and saying, hey guys, you know when you're drying up the dishes, because you have to do chores, and you're drying up with a schmutter? And my friend said, what? What's a schmutter? And I said, well, the thing you dry the dishes with. They said, no, that's a tea towel or a drying up cloth. So I went home and I said, Mum, the guys at school say it's not a schmutter, it's a tea towel. And my mum said, no, it's a schmutter. Thank you, Mum. So here she is again. Mum can speak two languages and sometimes mixes them up. She doesn't say don't moan, she says don't kvetch. She doesn't say don't slurp your soup, she says don't hup. She doesn't say don't burp, she says don't graps. And she doesn't say don't fart, she says don't fots. And when I have wrinkles in my socks, she says it looks like I've put my feet through a pile of bagels. So she says, take the bagels out of your socks. So I sing it all back to her. Don't kvetch, don't hup, don't greps, don't fots. Take the bagels out of your socks. We all sing it. You can join in if you like. Don't kvetch, don't hup, don't greps, don't fots. Take the bagels out of your socks. So there's a way of listening to your mum or your dad or your uncle or your granny, whoever you live with, and making a poem out of the little phrases that they say. And you can make it rhyme if you want to, or if you don't want to. And you can get repetition. That's when we repeat things. You can repeat things to make a bit of a rhythm. Yeah, so I got a rhythm going, didn't I? Don't kvetch, don't hup, don't greps, don't fots. And I sort of made it rhyme. Take the bagels out of your fots, out of your socks. All right. So you can do that, but listen to what your mum and people say at home and see if you can make a poem. Think of it a little bit like Lego or a jigsaw, where you have a piece of something that somebody says, and then you fit it next to something that somebody else says, and something that somebody else says, and make a pattern out of it. Like Lego or making a pattern. That's how you can do it. So on with the next poem. And the next poem is going to be Newcomers. Yes, here we go, Newcomers. And this one is about my father, because mysteriously about my father, I didn't really know certain things about him and his father. Here we go. My father came to England from another country. My father's mother came to England from another country. But my father's father stayed behind. So my dad had no dad here. and I never saw him at all. Then, one day in spring, some things arrived. A few old papers, a few old photos, and oh yes, a hulky, bulky, thick-checked jacket that belonged to the man I would have called Grandad, the man who stayed behind. But I kept that jacket, and I wore it, and I wore it, and I wore it, till I wore it right through at the back. Yes. So there, that one, I called that newcomers. And I wrote that because of the mysteries we sometimes have in our families. Who went where when? You know, sometimes when you get the old photos out and you say to your mum or dad, who's that? And your mum or dad goes, I think that's your Uncle Harry. Or they look at that and they say, maybe that was your mother's father's uncle or something. And you sit there and you have mysteries. Well, why not write a poem like that? Imagine you're sitting with your mum or your dad or your brother or your uncle, could be anybody, and you're going through photos and you're saying, who's that? Who's that? And then if there are mysteries, then, if you like, ask questions about it. The great thing about poems is you don't have to answer the questions. So you can just have a poem made up of the questions about people in your family. Because after all, we're saying home is family, family is home, whatever shape of family we have. And we all have different shapes of families. We all live in different ways, and that's great. That's fine. We don't have to live just one way. And so my dad, he never knew his dad. He never knew it. He was brought up in a home just with his mother and his mother's sisters and brothers and his grandparents. So that was the shape of my dad's family. So, you know, we can always write about that. That was his home. So there we are. And you can see that I wanted that connection with this man I didn't know because of that jacket. It came from the man I didn't know, didn't it, that jacket? And obviously I loved it because I said, and I wore it, and I wore it, and I wore it. That's a way you can show feeling in poems through repeating things. Now we're coming on to the next poem, and this one is called The Absentees. So what does that mean, the absentees? Again, that's about people missing. So what would we call missing? You might want to think about the word missing because we have home and we have people missing. Here we go. There are gaps. There are blanks in the house of my life. There's a face, nothing more. Something's gone from my life. She was here. He was there. In the rooms of my life, there's a place for them both in the words of my life. So that's thinking of home, okay? And there's a very famous phrase from the Bible, the Christian Bible, that says there are many mansions there are many rooms in the mansion. So I better get the quote right, but something like there are many rooms in the mansions of my Father's house. I may have got that quote slightly wrong, but it's the idea that there are rooms in our houses and that some of them might be full and some of them might be empty. So I don't mean you've got a huge house. I just mean that if you think of where your relatives lived, there'll be rooms that are full and rooms that are empty because somebody's died or because somebody's moved. So you might want to think about that because that's what we call an image, a picture. Full rooms, empty rooms. And the empty rooms are the gaps, the places where no one is, the absentees, if you like. So that's another way of thinking about home, thinking about who's there and who's not there. And you can keep it very simple, like I do. Did you see I got repetition again? There are gaps, there are blanks in the house of my life. There's a face, nothing more, something's gone from my life. So my life is then a chorus, isn't it? She was here, he was there in the rooms of my life. There's a place for them both in the words of my life. So that's what we call a structure. And when you write, you can do that too. Yeah. Okay, on we go. And this one is called arriving. Okay. And people arrive when we move around, don't we? And I wanted to think about arrivals. In this, there's somebody called Michael. It's not me. It's my father's cousin. So if you just worry for a moment that it's me, it isn't. Here we go. The guns stopped. The bombs stopped. The world was broken. People were broken. Millions of people had no home. Millions of people were far from home. One of them was called Michael. He was alone. No father, no mother, alone amongst millions. What now? He had an address. He had a cousin in England. So one day, sometime after the guns and bombs had stopped, a woman called Sylvia was in her house when the doorbell rang. Out of all the family out there where the camps had been, he was the only one who had survived. Now he was standing on the doorstep. He was the only one who had arrived. And he stayed and stayed, and where he stayed, he made his home. So that's the story of my father's cousin Michael, who lost all his relatives in Poland because of the thing that we call the Holocaust. So that was the persecution and genocide of Jews and other people. People used to be called gypsies. We now prefer to call Roma and Sinti and others, non-Jewish Poles and others who were killed as part of this thing that we call the Holocaust. Some people just say the Holocaust for the genocide of the Jews. And this Michael was a victim of that. He was a survivor, but he lost all his relatives and he arrived at his cousin's house. That was my auntie Sylvia. And in fact, in the family, we say he arrived at the door and just said, Sylvia, because that's all he could say in English. Yeah, so he couldn't say very much anyway. And so there's a story of arrival. And maybe some of you know about arrivals in your family. They may not have been refugees, but we're talking about arrivals and then making a home. And that's what Michael did. And he lived here very long time, from 1945 all the way to 2017, when he died at the age of 97, having lived here all that time. And he'd come from Poland and he'd been a taxi driver. There, that's the story of Michael. So I write about him as well. Okay. And then we're coming to another poem. And this poem is called On the Move Again. On the Move Again. And this poem, sorry, I'm just looking for a piece of paper here, but this one is called On the Move Again. And it's a bit like a rap. Yes, it's a bit like a rap. So sometimes if you want to express how things are in a poem, you can express them, if you like, with the rhythm of the poem. So if you want to say things move, you can make the poem have a bit of a rhythm. So you might want to think about that, because we're thinking about moving and arriving. So you might want to think about that. So as I read this, you might want to think about the images you've seen on the TV, perhaps, of people on the move. And you could write about that as well, because those people are looking for a home. Some of the people arriving on boats, some of them by train, other ways. And you could think about the images, that's to say the TV images that you've seen or online, and think about that, because that's how partly I wrote this. And so here we go. This is called On the Move Again. You know, you gotta go, no time to grieve, you just gotta leave. Get away from the pain, on the move again. Take the train, catch a plane, make the trip in a ship, take a hike, ride a bike, go by car, going far, use your feet on the street, get stuck in a truck. Then you arrive and you're alive. You arrive, you're alive. What you leave behind won't leave your mind. But home is where you find it. 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 So you might like to join in with that one. I'm going to do it one more time. All right. And you might want to join in with that one, because you can hear it's a little bit like a rap, and you can maybe guess the rhymes as they come along. So here we go. I'm going to do it again. You know, you got to go. No time to grieve. You just got to leave. Get away from the pain, on the move again. Take the train, catch a plane, make the trip in a ship. Take a hike, ride a bike, go by car, going far, use your feet on the street, get stuck in a truck. Then you arrive and you're alive. Yeah, you arrive, you're alive. What you leave behind won't leave your mind, but home is where you find it. 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 And there is one more poem that I just overlooked as I went through. I'm very sorry about that, folks. Here it is. This one is called The Migrants in Me. And that's about the idea that in my background, I've got migrants and I don't want to forget about them. I'm here because of the migrants who came. Maybe I look as if you could spin a story at me about how threatening and dangerous migrants are, as if neither I nor you would ever dream of upping sticks and living somewhere else and being, a migrant, as if neither I nor you might suddenly find ourselves in a wrong place at a wrong time, carrying the wrong passport with a face that doesn't fit and needing to get out, move, find a safe place because what is it? Only mad, bad, and sad people who do that sort of thing, and neither I nor you are mad, bad, or sad enough? No, don't think you can take the migrants out of me. The migrants in me tell me about crisscrossing Europe, about crisscrossing the Atlantic. They warn me, they remind me of long, long hours at workbenches. They remind me of relatives who at one moment were as safe as houses and the next had no houses to be safe in. So that's the idea. You could take that word migrant and you could think what it means. People say horrible things about migrants. People say good things about migrants. They say all sorts of things about migrants. You could explore that in a poem. What does it mean? Maybe you could explore your own family background and you'll find somebody somewhere moved, even if they just moved from one street to another across your town where you live. Or maybe they moved from one country to another. Maybe they were refugees, maybe they weren't. But get into that idea of what does it mean to move. You remember I began with the idea, here is the globe, here is the earth, here is our planet, all over it are the people, and we're all moving. One race, the human race, moving. And that word migrant, that's what it means. To migrate means to move. It's just a posh word to mean to move. So there we are. Those are my poems for today. Now you're going to have time to ask questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer as many as possible. So for the time being, I'm going to stop, and it's back to Vicky.
Thank you, Michael. I really enjoyed hearing your poems, got lots of inspiration as well, and I hope everyone else joining did. In fact, I can tell because there are so many questions coming in and brilliant, wide ranging. So, Michael, we'll try and get through as many as possible. But I'm going to start with a question that reflects upon the themes and things that we're talking about today and Refugee Week itself. And it's, I'll just get it open here. So Michael, it's Miss K from Woodley, class, asking, how do you think we can welcome refugees in Refugee Week and beyond? Big question to start with.
Yes, that's a big question and a bit bigger than me, really, because I'm a poet, not really somebody involved in refugee work directly, but I've in fact going to be doing a big concert in Cambridge for Refugee Week later. The big thing to do is to find websites and see what's there. So there's Refugee UK. If you just Google refugees and UK and see, and you'll find that there are all sorts of people, different groups in every town, in almost every village, all over the country, asking that question, wondering what we can do. Sometimes it's just collecting money or collecting food and that sort of thing. It just depends, because sometimes when there are wars, there are emergency appeals, as happened, say, with the Ukraine. So best thing to do is to use Google. This is the wonderful resource. I didn't have that when I was a boy. And we have this wonderful resource. So yes, use it.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael. And to follow up on that, I just need to get the name of the class. Sorry, there's so many questions, and I'm trying to make sure that I get everyone's name. In fact, I'll go to a different one slightly. We've got Erin from Elm Grove, and she's clearly reflecting on your poem Two Languages, and she asks, "What's your favourite word in Yiddish?"
Favorite word in Yiddish? So many. Here's one. My mum used to come into my bedroom and go, "This place is a Mishedemonk." And I'd say, "What's a Mishedemonk?" And she'd say, "Well, this place," and then walk out. What did she mean? Did she mean it was a mess? A Mishedemonk. That's very hard for Lorna. A Mishedemonk. What can Lorna do with Mishedemonk? Let's look at Lorna. I'm going to say Mishedemonk and watch her hands. Here we go. Mishedemonk. Lovely. Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you, Lorna.
Wonderful. So Mishedemonk. Well, mish in Yiddish and mishmash, it means a mix-up. So I think she was saying it's a mix-up, it's a mess. I think that's one of my favorite words.
Thanks, Michael. Um, a question that keeps coming up a lot in the chats, but Grace Thought Primary School asked this too. It's, do you get emotional writing these poems or even reading them?
Yes, I do, because I'm immediately, it's something happens. If you write about your mum, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, or people you care about, if you read it, or even as you're writing it, it's as if you're living with them in your head. And so it is, because my mum's not alive, my dad's not alive, my brother is, and I am. That's news, isn't it? And so when I do that, I sort of feel I'm with them. And then when I say their words, I become them. So when I say, "Don't kvetch" in that first poem, I am my mum. And I do lots of poems about my mum and my dad. I know some of you know one that's lots of videos have been made, so I won't talk about that. Memes and that sort of thing. And I become them when I do it. So it is emotional. It is very, very emotional. Thank you for asking that. You're the first person who's ever asked that. That's
Great
making me
question.
think.
And poetry is a way to explore our emotions and
It
feelings.
is. That's right. Put your feelings in a poem if you want to. That's right. When I said, "and I wore it, and I wore it, and I wore it" right the way through in that poem, that's a way of expressing emotion. You can say, "I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm angry," but you can also express emotion just by the way you structure your words. Like also that other one about gaps in my life, by repeating "in my life." There's a sort of, it's a bit like at the end of a song when it goes da 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 dum da dum da 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 bum in my life. You see, it's like like in music, it's called resolving the tune. It's resolving the tune.
Thanks, Michael. We've got some really interesting questions coming in as well. I was interested to ask you this one. So from year six HI, I think it is, from they were asking, have you ever been back to Poland to see where your ancestors came from?
I was due to go back to Poland and see, for example, where my father's father came from in a little village near Warsaw called Krosnowice, I think. I was due to go back in 2020, but I got COVID and there was lockdown, and I was put into an induced coma for 40 days and 40 nights. So that was when I was supposed to be in Poland, but instead I was unconscious. So my wife and I, we're talking about trying again sometime, but for the moment, I haven't been there. No, thank you for asking.
Thanks, Michael. We've also got a question from year six at St John's Catholic School in Lancashire, and they're reflecting on your poem Newcomers, and they're asking, this is another big question. If you met your granddad, what would you like to ask him?
Well, straight away, I'd ask him the question my dad asked almost every day of his life: why didn't you come? Because my dad's mum and dad, so it's my grandparents, so think of that, there's my dad and there's his grandparents, they split when they were in America. And mum came back with my dad and his sister and baby brother, and dad stayed behind in America with two more brothers. And my dad over here in England never saw his dad ever again. So my dad was only 2 when he came to Britain. And so he never saw him again. And he always wondered, why did my dad stay in America? And It's not like now where you just pick up the phone or you get on the internet and things like that. It was just a mystery. And this man who said he did say that he would come to England, he never did. And I've gone to America and, in fact, found out lots more about the man who stayed behind. And I found his grave. I found his grave in a cemetery in Boston, and found his brother's family as well. And I've met them all up, and now I'm friends with them all. I tried to tell my dad about that, and he wasn't really very interested. Sad, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a lot to
So
reflect. That's a big
I'd
question.
say, why didn't you come back? There's even another sadder bit. Are you ready for this?
Okay,
He sent cards and presents to my dad's older sister and didn't send any to my dad. I'm sorry
gosh.
to say that, but that's a very sad thing. And my dad didn't know why. His sister was Sylvia, who you met in that poem about Michael.
Mm.
So Sylvia got cards and presents, and my dad didn't. So when we talk about home, you see, there are problems, there are sad things, and we can write about them as well. We're not saying home is all cozy and always lovely and it's always cake and sweets and everything else. It is those, but also sometimes there are these sad things. What you've got, there's the word fracture. That means kind of breaking, like when a window breaks. There are these fractures and things happen like that. And if you want to write about those, you don't have to show anybody else if you don't want to. But if you want to write about them, you can. All right. If you want to write it and then throw it away or write it and keep it secret, that's fine too. Of course you can.
So we've actually got some questions reflecting on home as you're talking about it now. Faye R from Cardinal Langley asks, this might be a tricky one. We'll see. If you could represent home as a song, what song would it be?
Oh,
Might have to think about that one. We can.
yeah. Do you know one of my favorite songs? You won't like it very much because it's very old fashioned. But there's a singer called Bob Dylan. Yes, Bob Dylan. You may have heard of him, Bob Dylan, and he he did a song called "Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues," and it's a song I like listening to because actually that's a man who's actually feeling a bit lonely. And I think the first line goes something like this: um, "When it's when you're when you're on something like the first line is when you're on at Easter and it's in Juarez, it's a place in Mexico, in Juarez, and it's Easter time too, something like that. I can't remember the line now, but he wants to go home. So the last line is that he wants to go back to New York City, where he lives. So it's actually a film. It's a film. It's a song about being sad you're not at home and strange things, and you meet strange people. So I think that song, which I love very much, is actually about a man who wishes he was at home. And so I think that would be my song.
Great answer. Thank you, Michael. I think we can all think about a song that makes us think of home. I can say it's making me.
Yeah. And it might be a song about not being at home and wishing you were. There's a lot of Irish songs about feeling, they're called exile. That means where you're not at home and you wish you were. So that's another way of writing about home, saying, I wish I was at home. And Bob Dylan says, I've had enough and I want to be back in New York City.
Amazing. Thank you. Michael, we're getting lots of questions now come in about your writing process and that kind of thing. So I thought we'd move on to that. So Bahar from Mrs. Jackson's class asks, how old were you when you first started writing poetry? In fact, there's lots of those questions coming in.
Well, I wrote some poems at school because teachers asked me to write poems, just as happens with you. So we used to do that even a long time ago when I was at school. So I was born in 1946, so I'm very old, aren't I? And so we wrote poems at school, at primary and secondary school. But the first poem I ever wrote on my own, because I wanted to, sort of outside of homework, if you like, I was about 15 and I wrote about my very first memories. So the very first memories I had was sitting on a beach when I was about, I think, 2.5, possibly 3.5. I'm not quite sure. Sitting on a beach, being very hot, very cross, and hot sand, sand hot, the sun in the sky hot. And I just wrote it like that with single words because it's just like the images. So we've got a special word for that. It's called stream of consciousness. Consciousness is thinking, Stream is your stream of thinking. So when you write stream of thinking poems, you don't have to write in sentences. You don't have to worry about full stops, capital letters, special verbs. You can just say hot, sand, sun shining, hot, mum, hot, sand, sand, hot. And you can build it up like that. So it's an impression. Some of you may know impressionist paintings, which are done with like little dabs, where you can do just the same with words. You can make an impressionist poem like that. I've given you lots of words there. Impressionist, stream of consciousness. Quite good for things when things are like kind of a little bit blurry, a little bit in a rush, or a little bit vague because it's your first memories. So that was my first poem, and I wrote that when I was about 15. Yes, that's right. And I can remember being quite proud of it. In fact, I must look it up. You've got me interested to go and find it now.
I know, sure. It's also making me think there are lots of questions about how you start writing, the fear it can feel when you're staring at a blank page and just how you get going. But you're
Yeah,
talking about that stream of consciousness and not worrying about, the grammar and the punctuation and the spelling and just kind of going for it. Have you got any other
yeah.
tips?
Remember the page, whether it's on the screen like you're looking at now or on a piece of paper, it's your friend. Yes, it's not your enemy, it's your friend. You can say anything you like to it. It won't answer you back. It won't be horrible to you. And it'll listen to you because you can put it down and it just accepts what you put on it. So you can write anything you like on this piece of paper. And one way to think about it is to think of these thoughts and just put the thoughts down. So it's quite good to daydream. So I shut my eyes and I think. So I can think back to that moment on the beach, or I can think back to my mum saying, don't hook, don't greps, all that sort of thing. I can daydream and then just go straight into it. But if that doesn't come, then what you can do is imagine you're talking to somebody. So you decide who you're talking to. Is it your friend? Is it your mum, your dad? So decide somebody you're talking to, or maybe it's your class. And you say, well, how would you start? It might be me and my mum. There you go. Or me and my brother. So it could be anywhere you start. Or, hey, I must tell you this. So whatever is the first thing that you would say, use that as your intro line. Yes, intro, introduction. So your intro line could be the very first thing that you might say. All right. And then try and keep going in that voice for a bit. Now, you might cut that later. Remember, you can always change things. All right. So sometimes that helps. So some of my poems just begin, all right, with um, as if I'm just about to speak something. Yeah. We went to Berlin, and it was only 12 years after the end of the war. So that's how you might begin a conversation, isn't it? We went to Berlin. There you go. I did a. That's quite a good way to start a poem. We went to Berlin. All right. So you can do that. So there's two ways to begin. Another way is when you look at poems, let's say you look at my poems in that book, allow yourself to think, I could write a poem like that. All right. Michael Rosen's not anybody special. I could write a poem like that. And then whatever comes into your mind, whether it's the shape of my poem, the feeling of my poem, or a picture in my poem, steal it. Yes, I'm telling you to steal bits from my poems. Just let yourself just go, yeah. There's a very famous poet once began a poem, a fly buzzed when I died. I think that's how it goes. Anyway, I just thought I'd steal that, and I did. A fly buzzed when I was in the head study. You see, so you can just take bits. You may have heard things. Maybe there are gaps. That one I did about gaps. Steal it from me. Just say, yeah, I've got gaps in my family. There are gaps, and then you write about your gaps. Or if that one on the move, you've got to move it to prove it to move it. Maybe you think, I like that chorus. I'll steal that one from Michael Rosen and write my own words. You go ahead. Don't you worry.
Thank you, Michael. And you can find lots of recordings of your poems online anyway, so everyone can kind of watch them back. This recording will be available, and we have newcomers available to download, so the students can read that in the class as well, and yeah, use your poetry for theirs. I want to bring it back to the theme again. And we've got a question from Tabena at St. Alban and St. Stephen's School, and she's asking, why do you think it is important to write about refugees and the refugee experience?
Well, we have this word crisis. So crisis means, big problems. And sometimes things get bigger and bigger. And then when they get really big, we call that a crisis. So I think we are in the world facing a crisis because of a variety of things, wars and climate change in particular, those two things. So whatever is going to happen over the next 20 or 30 years, I've no idea. I'm hoping that people will stop having wars, but hoping that we can, if you like, hold back climate change, the global warming. But it does seem as if this means that people move. So we've got to solve this problem collectively. It's a problem for the whole world. It's not just a problem country by country by country. So I think that's urgent, and we've got to find ways of doing that. And that means being creative. So we quite often think creative is like, doing a dance or making some music, and that's great. But actually, creative thinking can be about anything and everything. Creative thinking can be about how you build a bridge or how you invent a medicine. Yes. And so we've got a great big problem, a crisis. So we need minds like all of you've got. So, great thing about creativity is that you can develop it over here, making up a tune, over here, writing a poem, over here, drawing up a bridge. But they all feed into each other. The person who can make up a poem might also be somebody who's great at making bridges and solving the crisis, as I'm calling it. Yeah. So we need creativity, and we need to be humane. That means kind to other human beings. That's what we have to be. Remember what Benjamin Zephaniah said: we never know. One day, any of us might be a refugee. We never know. Could be, like in my family, your family, or those people he talked about in the Lake District where there were floods. They were flooded out of their homes. The water's rising. There could be floods all down the east coast of Britain. They would have refugees inside Britain. Yes, we never know. We never know. That's the state of, remember? There's my picture.
Thanks, Michael. Important message for us all to be reflecting on. I'm going to wrap up with some information for teachers, but there's been requests in the chat for you to reread your poem On the Move. I wondered if we could end on that, and Lorna, if that's okay for you. Okay, just give me a thumbs up. Is that all right for you, Michael? I'll just okay, let teachers know. So thank you for joining us. And we do have lots of classroom resources available for you to download for free to continue marking Refugee Week in the classroom. And that includes a selection of poems from a wide range of poets, all exploring the theme of home. The link to the website is in the chat. And at the end of the week, we're inviting you and your students to take inspiration from the poems that you've explored to have a go at creating your own piece of writing. And hopefully Michael's given you lots of starting points today as well. We'd love to see your writing, so do send them to us. You can use our email address, which is in the chat, or if you've got school social media accounts, you can tag us at Literacy Trust, and Michael too, I'm sure. So we'd love to see your writing, and thank you so much for joining us today. Let's end, Michael, with On the Move.
You gotta go, no time to grieve, you just gotta leave. Get away from the pain, on the move again. Take the train, catch a plane, make the trip in a ship. Take a hike, ride a bike, go by car, going far. Use your feet on the street, get stuck in a truck. Then you arrive and you're alive. You arrive, you're alive. What you leave behind won't leave your mind, but home is where you find it. Yeah, home is where you find it. Yeah, home is where you find it. Home is where you find it.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. Have a lovely